So you're thinking about making a warlock, a caster who's literally defined by another entity. Then why play the whole campaign like that thing doesn't even exist? We're going to handcraft some more specific patrons to fit exactly what your warlock has become. First off, the defining trait of all warlocks. Why did you make the pact? A few examples of a warlock's motives, as with most wishful beings, would be wealth, fame, power, understanding, revenge, safety, or a sweet-bootied vixen. I'll be lining up 7 warlocks because they can't stop making patrons, and because my abusive patron is YouTube herself. So going down the line, I'll make SHAQMART the Slimy, BEEFOT the Golden, Grundle the Ashen, Trolloc the Torn, Shank the Shiv, the Gravewalker, and Carl the Starchild. Let's start with SHAQMART's patron. SHAQMART is a slimy servant of an archfey, and not some fancy fairy. Both the Seelie and Unseelie are host to powerful creatures, and I've decided to pick an Annis hag. I love hags, and I really don't know why, but I've named her Granny Gertrude Toefungus. Every warlock patron has a reason to grant mortals power, but for an ancient Annis hag, this is actually easy to work out. Annis hags relish in torment and fear. Granny Toefungus, in her ancient and disgusting wisdom, chooses to do this with representatives. SHAQMART is a simple Machiavellian who longs for power and doesn't give 2 flying chicken shits about other people's feelings. So using this, we take our first step toward his pact. How did they first meet? We'll cut these meetings short for this video, but each pact forming is essentially a 45-minute movie that ends on a cliffhanger. SHAQMART was a slimy guy by nature. Let's say he was a cutthroat loan shark. He made a bunch of dark deals and struck fear into people's hearts. But SHAQMART wanted more. He wanted power. So Granny Gertrude heard about his ability to cultivate fear and came directly to him, granting him the power he desired. Next question about good old Granny. Do people like serving her? She's as old as Jesus' first fart, so she knows her way around people. Let's say she only hires twisted people who enjoy spreading fear, because it makes her job that much easier. Next up, which is probably the toughest thing for a DM to implement, what does the patron ask of their warlocks? Granny Gertrude Toejam has her own form of magic, designed for her use, so she gives every servant a small silver mirror. Whenever they strike fear into a creature's heart, they have to hold up the mirror and record the terror. They have to meet terror quotas, and return to her every 30 days to show her what they've done. If SHAQMART the Slimy doesn't cause enough torment, he'll probably be a frog next week. One thing to understand when making a warlock and their patron is their similarity to clerics. Patrons are not gods, but they're all just a step below. Because of this, warlocks often worship them in a similar manner. But not all warlocks have to be happy about their pact. Next up is BEEFOT the Golden. Let's put a twist on BEEFOT and make him a goblin with strong chaotic tendencies. This sucks for BEEFOT because he's the child of a prophecy, overseen by an ancient Codal. How did this unlikely pair meet? First, you need to know about Codals. These guys were made before time and exist to fulfill prophecies and guard relics till the end of time. One of these prophecies being BEEFOT's grand duel against a dark god, Charlie. At his birth, the Codal gave him the divine power of Booyog. As a goblin, he thinks Booyog is awesome. However, the conditions of his pact and his nature prove difficult for both him and his patron. BEEFOT's least favorite binding is that he cannot tell a lie. The ultimate obligation for BEEFOT is to become worthy of the sword and defeat Charlie once and for all. Other minor commands are simple good-natured things that BEEFOT struggles with, like charity and humility. BEEFOT the Golden proves very tough to teach for the Codal, and his thieving and dominating tendencies clash heavily with what he is meant to become. Variety is the spice of life, and warlocks should vary as much as you can make them. When making a patron, dive into the monster manual or do some Wikipedia surfing to find a good base. Not everything about them has to be correct. Just have fun. It's D&D. Next up, we'll design the most classic and common warlock, a Pact of the Fiend. For a Fiend patron, you can use either a Demon Lord or an Archdevil. Their hierarchy is wildly confusing, and someday I'll have a video or two explaining them. But for Grundle the Ashen, I'll make him a servant of Mammon, the merchant king of the Nine Hells. Grundle, let's say, was a very poor man who lost everything to gambling. He sought out a ritual to summon a demon of wealth and met with one of Mammon's devils. As with most who deal with devils, the contract was more clever than poor Grundle. On page 666, as a footnote that redirects to an exemption clause detailed in a PDF provided via flash drive, which stands on a basis that exists in an encrypted message that only appears once the Konami code is entered that details damage liability and additional terms that affect both parties. Once Grundle is given a wealth of gold and power, all other material possessions he earns or steals are immediately transferred to Mammon. I don't know. Due to this, it's likely that Grundle the Ashen struggles to eat food or accept anything that isn't gifted to him. This simple term covers both of our issues. Grundle clearly doesn't like Mammon, and Mammon only has one request that is ever present. Rarely are warlocks the victors in their stories, and making a fiendish pact will always have a downside for the player. Now we'll move on to Trolloc the Torn. Pact of the Great Old One is my personal favorite because it pulls from Lovecraft-inspired works. Naturally, we'll be unique with this patron and make it something new. Let's go with... We'll follow a classic tale and make Trolloc a woman who looked too hard for answers. Whatever kind of research she used to do doesn't matter now. An interesting note about Eldritch patrons is that most of the time they have no mental note of mortals, and Cthulhu probably doesn't know Trolloc exists. Not to say that she gets her powers scot-free, she likely either sets guidelines for herself or feels unavoidable urges to do strange and alien things, like using poopy on the wall. A much simpler and mutually beneficial bond is the one between Shiv the Shanker and Shank the Shiv. In order to make a Hexblade patron, take a walk with me down to the DM's guide. Page 214, Sentient Magic Items. That's all you need to know. It's detailed essentially how to make a Hexblade patron right here. So we'll make Shank an item with low sentience, but strong desires and powerful magic. He communicates with Shiv using emotions, often being bloodlust. He gives her added senses and can see and hear out to 120 feet. Hexblade alignments can really be anything, but we'll make Shank the Shiv chaotic evil. One thing to note about most of these weapons is that they were likely created by a neutral goddess of death. So as long as this warlock is killing things, they're on the right track. Shiv the Shanker, who I forgot to mention is a 6-year-old halfling, found Shank the Shiv while playing in the ruins. Being young and impressionable, Shank's magic convinced Shiv to use Shank to shank people using Shank as her Shiv, and that's their whole relationship. Next up we have the Gravewalker, with the Undying Pact. We'll make his patron someone we all know and love, and is well known for collecting many friends and giving away free power. A cererak! In this totally real scenario, was hanging out at a local pub playing the trumpet. When a cererak heard his music and loved it so much, he gave power over life and death. Then they went to a cererak's pad in a rag Corvette, and a cererak gave his phylactery. Loves being known as the Gravewalker, and regularly binge drinks with his lich friend. All his patron wants him to do is that he accompanies adventurers and urges them into deadly dungeons. And lastly, we have Carl the Starchild. His loyalty is to the Raven Queen, who for some reason is also worshipped by clerics. Carl was once a resident of Sigil, the City of Doors. However, he suffers from lengthy and detailed sleepwalks. No one knows how many planes he's visited, but Carl the Starchild didn't pick his nickname. One day he slipped into the Shadowfell and met with the lovely Raven Queen. She is a non-variable patron and is exclusively the god of death. She only desires that creatures die when they're supposed to. She made a pact with Carl's sleeping form, and now he walks the material plane in a quasi-dream state and destroys undead with his eyes closed, mumbling both incantations and stuff about crabs. Thanks for watching. Examples work best for me when it comes to creating things, and you can use what I did here hopefully as a template. Or play these stupid characters. I really don't care. That's the end of the video.